Okay, quite a week. I was making some notes yesterday about what I wanted to talk about, and then of course Trump and Netanyahu happened, and a lot of that became secondary. So it's hard to imagine that all of you have not heard or are not following what happened yesterday with Trump's press conference. Um, it would be comforting in a way if this was just some random brainstorm of Trump's, which he's want to speak about. But part of the press conference, he was reading a prepared statement. So somebody
Yeah.
wrote this down, wrote part of it down, and presented it. Maybe it was Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, who has talked previously about the fabulous real estate possibilities in Gaza. Uh, but then, of course, he amplified on it, including acknowledging that the U.S. would own Gaza, in his words, and that if necessary, would send troops there to make sure we owned it. So it's really hard to know how serious any of this is. It's so deranged that even for Trump, that it's hard to know if this is a real proposal or not. It goes beyond anything even most of the Israeli government has been proposing, although plenty of Israelis on the right wing of the government and outside the government have proposed ethnic cleansing of Gaza, but not building a Riviera, presumably with Trump towers and casinos along the coast of Gaza. So the response around the world, uh, of course, from the Palestinians, but elsewhere, has been sort of partly disbelieving and partly, outrage. Even before Trump's statement, he has talked about possibly ethnically cleansing Gaza previously, but not going into so much detail. The Arab countries, including relatively close allies of the United States, have, repudiated any idea that they would take in, millions of Palestinians to be ethnically cleansed from Gaza, and that included a letter signed by Egypt, Jordan, Qatar, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia a day or two ago. And in response to Trump's statement, the Saudi government officially issued a letter that was pretty strong. And they issued it at 4 a.m. Saudi time. Obviously, they were watching Trump and Netanyahu live. And they were so anxious to get a response out that they responded in the middle of the night, Saudi time. And they reiterated, despite what Trump has said, that Saudi Arabia would not allow diplomatic relations with Israel unless there was a sovereign Palestinian state. So, that's good, at least certainly for Saudi Arabia. Anyway, it's good. Uh, was Netanyahu involved in producing this plan or not? It's hard to know. And just on the issue, oh, by the way, there was a poll published a few days ago of Jewish Israelis that showed 80% of Israeli Jews are in favor of ethnic cleansing of Gaza. So they're cheering. That section of Jewish society in Israel is cheering. But at the same time, Trump continues to do things that are a little surprising. Along with his statement about Gaza yesterday, he spoke about Iran. And on the one hand, he reinstituted his policy of maximum pressure, as he calls it, of severe sanctions on Iran, but otherwise issued a pretty sympathetic, statement about, he wanted Iran to prosper and we should get along and maybe we could reach an agreement on the nuclear question in Iran. And he said that Iranian leaders are not interested in developing nuclear weapons. So this was, on the one hand. On the other hand, Israelis, of course, the top international priority of Israel is confrontation with Iran, hopefully with U.S. assistance. So we don't know. And again, many of his appointments have been troubling to the Israelis and the interventionists, the neocon and liberal interventionists, including one who was to a position in the State Department who had been pretty close to overt sort of neo-Nazi anti-Semites. And the Anti-Defamation League, which is really the Israel Defense League, who had complained about this guy a few years ago, they deleted the web page about this guy after Trump appointed him. So again, we should remember that Zionists regard anti-Semites as potential allies internationally. And speaking of that, when Netanyahu he's staying in the United States till Saturday, I believe, but he's been having meetings with members of Congress and others, and he had a big meeting with evangelical Christians in Washington, including some who are, totally nutcases, and that includes the nominated Trump ambassador to Israel, Huckabee. And he has not met with Jewish organizations yet. And I just point this out because it's part of Israel's strategy in the United States to see their strongest supporters among right-wing evangelical Christians and see the Jewish population of the United States, which tends to be liberal and vote Democratic, as, unsafe allies in the United States. And by the way, Israel and Israel supporters have been actively financing these evangelical, politically pro-Israel organizations for many years. And one example is there's some concern among the pro-Israel evangelicals that the young people are not as pro-Israel as the older people. So they've instituted a kind of birthright program for evangelical youth that they call Passages. And the biggest contribution to this program was by the Marcus Foundation. Bernie Marcus, the founder of Home Depot, gave $12 million to this program, which will enable them to bring 4,000 young Christian evangelicals to Israel on their version of Birthright. So in Gaza, sorry if I'm going on too long, there's just a lot going on. In Gaza, of course, the right wing in Israel is adamant about not fulfilling the 3 stages of the agreement that they signed. We're in stage 1 now, and they don't want to go to stage 2 and 3, which involve further withdrawal of Israel from Gaza and eventually a total and complete ceasefire. And I would say it's more than likely that they will not fulfill this agreement. That's Israel's modus operandi. They will accept the good things for them in any international agreement, and when it's inconvenient, not carry them out. That goes back to the Oslo Accords in 1993, when they had agreed on a negotiating process that would lead to a Palestinian state within 5 years, which should have been 1998. And how many years ago is that? 26 years ago, and it hasn't happened. And of course, in Lebanon, they have been violating their own ceasefire hundreds of times and have said that they are not withdrawing according to the deadline of the agreement, which was a week ago, and are going to stay for some indeterminate time further. And the U.S. has blessed that. The U.S. is one of the guarantors of this ceasefire, and we said, okay, they could take another month if need be, and that could turn into forever. And in Syria, they've expanded their occupation from beyond their already occupied Golan Heights, and have said that they have no intention of leaving anytime soon, and apparently are building military bases in the new territory of Syria that they have occupied. In the West Bank, they've stepped up, despite their, being a ceasefire in Gaza, they've stepped up their high-level military assaults on Jenin and Tulkarm, especially using missiles, drones, and aircraft bombing, and destroying large swaths of housing within those territories and killing, in the last months, hundreds of people in the West Bank. And by the way, in the U.S., Trump has just proposed an additional $1 billion in arms transfers to Israel. This is on top of the Biden $8 billion that was proposed in his last days as president, and on top of the $20 billion that we've already given to Israel in the last year and a half. And he also took the hold off of the shipments of 2,000-pound bombs to Israel, which was briefly delayed by the Biden administration. These are 2,000-pound bombs, which Israel has used in densely populated areas of Gaza, 1-ton bombs. Trump's new proposal is to give Israel 4,700 1,000-pound bombs, which are still pretty strong to be using in populated area. And finally, in terms of repression locally, the Department of Education has launched an investigation against 5 universities for their alleged anti-Semitism and discriminatory treatment of Israeli or Jewish students. And there's also a movement to put the screws onto K to 12 education, recognizing that, it's important to catch younger people in the sort of pro-Israel propaganda net and rebuff any, propaganda, as they call it, that might be pro-Palestinian. So the struggle for political rights and free speech in the United States is ongoing on this issue. And on the one hand, it's very dangerous that they have tools of repression. On the other hand, the fact that they have to use tools of repression mean that persuasion is no longer very fruitful for them. So that's a good sign. So that's, that's all I want to say right now.
Thanks. Questions or comments? Okay, hearing none.
Good.
Jeff and Paul.
Yes, Dan?
Hi, I just had one comment. You all know Daniela Weiss, our favorite horrific settler. And she said many times over the last year that they're going to make Gaza hell so that Palestinians do not want to live in Gaza. And then today, I don't know why people were NPR was interviewing people in Gaza. Do you want to stay or do you want to leave? What kind of question is that when you have nothing? And so some people are like, this is hell. They at least found one person who said, this is hell, I want to leave. Kind of exactly what Daniela Weiss had said months ago, that we're going to make it hell, so they will want to leave. And then it was almost being played out in the NPR, or at least this one show, as if, it's such a hellish place. Maybe the Gazans do want to leave, and kind of, in a sense, supporting Trump's idea. So the American public will be like, it's hell. Trump wants to fix it and give them some space. So it's almost like it'll support the narrative and make it almost humane that they are being asked, given space outside of Gaza.
Daniela Weiss is an American Israeli, by the way, and a total fascist. She's one of the leaders of the settler movement in the West Bank, and on all issues, she's literally a fascist. So
she's a fascist, but I really like how direct she is. She's a horrible human being, but she's she doesn't try to cover up her horribleness. She's a straight shooter.
There are some Arabs who say that about Trump, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But at least he's speaking sincerely, as opposed to the bullshit they get from Democrats and liberals.
Exactly.
Okay, Dan.
Yeah, I want to just reiterate the absolute craven absurdity of watching those two sit next to each other and talk about this horrible situation and we got to help them fix it. Just was like not the two people, but the two countries that orchestrated the misery, and then talking about how terrible it is there and how unlivable and how we can help. Horrible. The second phase of the ceasefire, I agree with Jeff. It's not going to happen. You remember some years ago, 3 Israeli soldiers were kidnapped and killed immediately. And the Israelis and Netanyahu didn't tell the country that they had been killed and invaded with viciousness to try and save them, knowing that they were already dead. Something like that's playing out with the Bibas family, that Hamas told the Israelis, we're killed in an early bombing. But of course, now they've become the photo op everywhere of the young redheaded kids about how they're struggling. They're gonna save them. Just phase two. There's so many ways that phase two is not going to happen, and everybody is being sort of tenderized to prepare for that. The United States saying they're going to Gaza. Steve Witt, his emissary there.
Well,
Yeah, Steve Witkoff. He said that there are 30,000 ordinances, unexploded ordinances in Gaza. Let me tell you something. Hamas made extraordinary use in their fight using Israeli ordnance that was just abandoned there. You ask any Israeli family that lost soldiers because of that. The United States and Israel is not interested in letting them have an arsenal that's provided by the United States and Israel, which is sitting there. Turkey, the U.S., Trump, I don't know if he's real. He says he's pulling 2,000 troops out of Turkey. That's going to screw over the Kurds in northeast Turkey. And I don't know what kind of transaction took place between Trump and Erdogan in order to make that happen. And I certainly don't know what it means for the Syrian leadership. It's absolutely insane. Thank you, Jeff.
just a couple of points. So Witkoff has said just a few days ago that his main mission is to see that all phases of the ceasefire agreement are carried through.
Okay.
Who knows, whether he's speaking for himself or for Trump. And just not to be picky, but when you talk about soldiers being kidnapped, soldiers are captured, not kidnapped. And part of that language of hostages, only one side has hostages, one side kidnaps.
Right. Prisoners of war.
That language infiltrates our brains, and we need to be mindful about it.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Absolutely.
Okay, Julie.
Claire, do you mind if I read this question that you put in the chat? I'm curious about the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Any analysis of who belongs to the Arab Americans for Trump? Christian Lebanese or Arab businessmen?
I don't know, but it is true that a certain slice of the Maronite Christian community in Lebanon is fascist minded and has always been and is pro-Israel. Some of them even enlisted as mercenaries for the Israel occupation forces in South Lebanon. And some of them are very involved in the far, far right in the United States. So not surprising that there is such a thing as Arab Americans for Trump, but who they are exactly, I can't say. And I should have mentioned also, thanks to Abby, some good news, which we don't have much of. The parliament in Belgium officially declared Israel a genocider in Gaza and advocated sanctions, not just divestment and boycott, but sanctions, which of course is the first, someone has to say it first. And in terms of South Africa, that was the sort of, beginning of the end for apartheid when that became widespread. So good for Belgium. I don't know what exactly is going on there, why Belgium, but, it's a good thing.
Thank you.
Let's see, I'm just going to switch over to gallery view. One sec. Why is this so hard?
Well, I was next for keeping stack. Can I just quickly talk?